privacy and protection conversation should go beyond technicalities.
Is your business prepared for the challenges of data security in today's digital age? Protecting sensitive information has never been more critical. Get practical experience by participating in interactive exercises, simulations, and real-world case studies. With our cutting-edge curriculum and hands-on exercises, you'll gain practical experience in data protection techniques and tools. You'll learn industry best practices and innovative strategies to ensure the security of your valuable information. Protect your data with Data Protection and Privacy Academy, because your business deserves the best. Protecting your business data is crucial in today's digital world. But how can you ensure that your data remains secure against ever-evolving cyber threats? Introducing Data Protection and Privacy Academy, the comprehensive training program that equips you with the skills and knowledge to safeguard your valuable information.
Whether you're an IT professional, a business owner, or an aspiring data protection officer, our program is designed to cater to your specific needs. Enroll in Data Protection and Privacy Academy today and embark on a journey towards a secure and trusted future for your business.
Protecting your business data is crucial in today's digital world. But how can you ensure that your data remains secure against ever-evolving cyber threats? Introducing Data Protection and Privacy Academy, the comprehensive training program that equips you with the skills and knowledge to safeguard your valuable information.
Whether you're an IT professional, a business owner, or an aspiring data protection officer, our program is designed to cater to your specific needs. Enroll in Data Protection and Privacy Academy today and embark on a journey towards a secure and trusted future for your business.
This ensures swift action. Protecting sensitive data is more critical than ever before. But what happens when data breaches occur? The Data Breach Register serves as a centralized database where organizations are required to report incidents involving the unauthorized access, disclosure, or loss of personal information. Why organizations need a Data Breach Register? Mandatory reporting. Organizations must promptly notify the Nigeria Data Protection Commission and affected individuals in the event of a data breach. This ensures swift action to mitigate risks and safeguard personal information. Detailed records. The register maintains detailed records of reported breaches, including the nature of the incident, the type of data compromised, and the remedial actions taken by the organization. Compliance and enforcement. Non-compliance with data breach reporting requirements can result in significant penalties and reputation damage for organizations. The register helps enforce regulatory standards and promotes a culture of data protection. Here is a step-by-step guide on how to use the Data Breach Documentation Register. About the organization. Fill the name of the organization. Fill the registration number issued by the Corporate Affairs Commission. Fill the location where the organization is physically situated or conducts its operations. Fill the official email address of the organization. From the list below, pick the most appropriate based on the nature of your core business activity. Data Protection Officer. Fill the name of the designated Data Protection Officer. Fill the email address of the Data Protection Officer. Fill the phone number of the Data Protection Officer. Fill the Data Protection Officer's acquired data protection privacy certifications. Details of data breach. A unique number that indicates where in the register a data breach is reported and documented. A unique identification number or code assigned to each documented data breach. Specify the exact date and time the data breach occurred if known. Specify the exact date and time the data breach was discovered. Provide the number of data subjects affected. If the number is not known, give an approximate number. Description of breach. Explain the process by which a security breach resulted in the unintentional or deliberate loss, alteration, disclosure, or access to personal data. Measures taken or to be taken. Did you inform all individuals affected? Indicate yes or no. List other regulators informed. When did you first notify the NDPC of the data breach? If yes, indicate the date and time. Remedial action. Kindly state the remedial action taken. To place an order, kindly visit dataprotectionacademy.com NG or call 0816 82444.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's training session. We'll be learning risk assessment today, and this is Module 4. For everyone who has been following our training, this training will equip you with the necessary skills to be an effective Chief Information Security Officer. And the training is going to last for a period of 6 months. And after that training period, you'll be given a certificate having gone through the entire modules. So we'll be learning risk assessment. Let's get started. We'll be looking at an overview of risk assessment, trying to understand what threats, vulnerability are. And also we'll look at some risk assessment framework and also go for quiz section just to be sure that participant understands the module. So when you are in cybersecurity, there are keywords that sometimes may be confusing. One of which is threat, vulnerability, and risk. So what is threat? What is vulnerability? And what is risk? Now, the easiest way to be able to define all this is to know that threat simply means what an organization is defending itself against. So as an organization, you will be defending yourself against things like ransomware, data breach. So that is a threat you are facing. Now, when it comes to vulnerability, the weakness or gaps that might undermine the effort of your IT personnel, and your IT resources, those are what we call vulnerabilities. So let's say, for example, you have a weak authentication method. You only use username and password. That is a vulnerability. There's also the human factor. Somebody can be an insider threat. So that is also a vulnerability. And maybe you are using applications that are not supported by the vendors because they have reached their end of life. So that is a vulnerability. So those gaps or those weaknesses that might undermine the effort of your IT personnel is what we call vulnerabilities. Now, when it comes to risk, the calculated assessment of all the threats and vulnerabilities that is within your network or information system is what is known as a risk. So it's either you have a low risk, a medium risk, or high risk. So I will emphasize it again. When you are talking about threat, it means what your organization is defending itself against. When it comes to vulnerabilities, it means those gaps, any weakness that might undermine the effort of your IT personnel and your IT resources. And when it comes to risk, it is the calculated assessment of both the threats and vulnerabilities that is within your network and your system. So this is how you define threat, vulnerability, and risk. You are free to drop your question on the comment section so that we can address those questions as we move on. So it is very important for CISOs to understand the difference between a threat, a vulnerability, and a risk, and how to calculate this different risk that the organization will be exposed to. So now let's look at threats. What are threat examples? One common example of a threat will be a malware. A malware will be a software that could pose security risk to your system. Another threat could be phishing attack. Cyber criminals will always try to break into systems that are weak. So it means that is a threat. Now we have distributed denial of service attack that will disrupt your network by flooding it with so much traffic that it becomes overloaded to prevent legitimate requests from being fulfilled. So that is also a threat. So at the end of today's training, it is very important that the CISOs go back to their various institutions and see which threats are we exposed to, what vulnerabilities are we exposed to, and what is our risk profile. So a zero-day exploit will be a security flaw, either within your software or hardware, that is yet to be known by the vendor or the manufacturer, and there's no update or security patch for it. So once a criminal discovers that, they exploit it. That is why it is called zero-day exploit. So we also have what we call APT, advanced persistent threats. Now, when an unauthorized user gain access to a system or a network, the person may be there for months. If you follow through Facebook and data breach, they were compromised, and for close to 12 months, they never even realized they were compromised. So that would be a good example of an APT. So when an unauthorized person gains access to a system or network and remains there undetected for an extended period of time, it is known as APT. Another beauty about this training is that it's going to give you the knowledge to be able to be prepared for certifications exams, because you need to build the foundation, and that is what we're trying to achieve with this training. So we also have supplier chain attack. Every financial institution needs third-party vendors. When you want to get onboarded on NIPS, you also need to provide some data, and maybe one of your service provider is handling this aspect for you. They will have access to your data. You also need to integrate with InterSwitch. So as a financial institution, you have third-party vendors that have access to your resources. So a cyber criminal can hack into a third-party vendor, thereby compromising you, the data controller. So that will be a supply chain attack. Now, we also have data manipulation, which is also a form of cyber attack. Now, people may not want to steal data, but they may want to alter the data record. So in that case, that would be a threat, because the data is still with your organization, but the records have been altered. So that is a case of data manipulation. Now, we also have wiper attack. Now, there are times whereby an organization may face a security threat that will wipe out data from its server or IT resources. So that will be a case of a wiper attack, and it's also a threat. So it's always good for CISOs to sit down, look at the organization, and see what threats are they exposed to. We also have man in the middle attack. If your website is not on HTTPS, it is very easy for you to be a victim of man in the middle attack, right? So this is when an attack is done in a way that it breaks into the communication between two parties. So someone trying to access your banking portal and the server. So in between, where you have your server and the person trying to access the banking portal to be able to gain access to his account, somebody with IT knowledge can break in, and this is what we call man in the middle attack. So the person will alter the communication chain. Now, we also have drive by download. Now, when organizations notice that their system have been compromised, it may be as a result of different things. But one could be that the employees may have downloaded some things without even knowing. So when you visit some sites, unknown to you, you've downloaded a spyware or a malware, and that can be used to eavesdrop on your communication. So that will be a case of a drive-by download. Now, we also have unpatched software. In module 1, we talked about end-of-life application, right? So when an application reaches its useful state and has stopped receiving updates from the manufacturer or the vendor, there will be no way you can update the software, right? In that case, that software is now vulnerable to security threats. because every software will always have bugs that needs to be fixed. If not, people will exploit it. So at some point, a manufacturer or a vendor can say, we are no longer supporting this software, and there will be no more security updates. In such a case, that software will not receive updates. So it will be vulnerable. And because softwares are expensive, many organizations try to use crack software or free software, right? Those things can pose threat within your system. Now, many of us, our data center are either housed by other organizations or on the cloud. So in such a case where you have disruption, either through flooding or theft or physical damage, that will also be a threat. So organizations, irrespective of their location, irrespective of their size, irrespective of their IT budget, will have threats to face. Now, other threats that organization could also be exposed to could be spyware, ransomware, Trojan, intellectual property theft, data destruction, malvesting, data breach, denial of service attack, web application attack, inadequate staffing. Yes, inadequate staffing is also a threat. If you have less staff strength that are competent enough, it's also a threat. And you also have privilege abuse and shadow IT systems. We are not going to go through all this one by one, but you also have the explanation as part of the resources that will be shared so we can be able to move on. But if you have any question based on what we've explained on threat, you can drop it on the comment section and I'll address it as we progress. Thank you. So now let's look at vulnerability. Now, vulnerability could be human error. It could be improper system and network. Take, for example, an employee who is not knowledgeable in IT could click on a link and make the organization vulnerable. So that is a vulnerability. So your lack of knowledge that makes you to make a mistake, that is a human error. It's a vulnerability. Now, that is why if you see cyber criminals, they target people that are not tech savvy. That's why you see somebody will send an OTP that ought not to be sent to any other person just because he received an urgent call that needs that attention. So we also have improper system and network. We also have inadequacy of data loss prevention tool. Now, there are tools that can help mitigate data loss. But because some of these tools are kind of expensive, organizations don't want to invest in it. So when you don't have data loss prevention tools, it is a vulnerability. Again, if you don't have a means to test your software in-house or you outsource it to somebody, that means there's inadequate qualified software testers. So that your mobile application now, before people download it, someone is supposed to test if it is working properly. Is there any vulnerability? You understand? Is the graphic user interface user friendly? So these are things that software testers look at. The vulnerability aspect, the GUI aspect. So when you don't have adequate software testers, it's a vulnerability that is waiting for the organization. Now, you also have inadequate awareness campaign. It's also a vulnerability because as a financial institution, you have customers, you have employees, you have third-party vendors. All these people can be a big issue when it comes to your IT security. If your customers that use your services and your product don't understand security, they will share their password and come back to you to blame you that their accounts are not secured. So what do? You have to educate them. Tell them that passwords should never be shared. Tell them that passwords should be changed at least every 90 days. Tell them that passwords are not what they keep on their diaries or papers that can be accessed by other people. Educate them when they visit your bank or your financial institution. They should keep their password safe. And their password should be at least 8 characters or 12 characters. 8 characters is when you have OTP also integrated. But 12 characters is when you don't have OTP. It may be difficult for them to have 12 character password, but They can use tools like the capacity antivirus that comes with password manager, or the Norton antivirus that comes with password manager. Some of your customers use such tools. So you can educate them that, see, you have to use secured passwords, and tell them not to access their banking platform on public systems. When you go to the office and you are using a system that will be used by other people, and you come and log in your account, and you now bookmark your account, it's not safe. It's not just about your account, even your social media. So educate your customers that, see, you have to be careful how you use our platform. Again, your employees, you also need to train them, because they can pose an insider threat, which will now lead to human error vulnerability. So you educate your employees, have security awareness training often, and your third-party vendors, you also make sure that they have secured access to your system, maybe using VPN. But more than that, they should also be aware about the security risk while accessing your system. So we have inadequate funding. Funding is a major issue and is a high vulnerability, because for you to invest in IT, trust me, you need to spend money. And with the current exchange rate and our dependence on the dollar, the budget for IT will keep increasing. So management must understand that IT is an investment, not an expense. If they don't have that ideology, they will always see IT as what? An expense. It's an investment, because your reputational damage could even be more than what you've been spending on IT budget. Customers can decide not to use your product any longer. So make sure that management understand that investing in IT is also a form of um, brand building, so that no customer will be able to say this system that I'm using is not as secured. We know many banks that we used to crack joke that their portal is just crazy, you understand. But what I just want you to understand is, make sure that management understand that investing in IT costs, but it's an investment. Now, log management process. There's what we call audit log. Audit log keeps a track of whatever someone does within an application. Peradventure there is a risk or a data breach, it is that audit trail that is used to carry out investigation. So if you don't have such systems integrated on your application, carrying out a forensic investigation when a data breach occurs will be more difficult, because you have to rely on information that are not tested. Now, inadequate patch management. Anytime you have a mobile app on Play Store or iOS store, from time to time, you need to update it. From time to time, you need to see if it is vulnerable to any bug or any risk, so that customers who are using it will always have to update it. And that's why the fintech are more robust to when you compare them with some commercial banks. If you followed fintech, for example, over a period of time, you notice that the rate at which they update the application is more often than the traditional banks. Well, but the reality is this: updating your software, making sure those patches that you've discovered that needs update are done, is very critical. If not, it becomes a vulnerability. Now, inadequate staffing is also a vulnerability that can be exploited. So if you don't also have a security operations center, it's also a risk. But not every organization can afford to have an SOC, right? But the little things you can do to make sure that your systems are safe and secured, you should do them. Then we have use of end of life system. It's a vulnerability. We've talked about this in the module 1. There are some systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer or vendor, but they are still in use. And sometimes we also use some legacy applications we've been using for years, and they have many of our data, and trying to migrate to another system may be difficult. Now, you must realize something. End of life systems pose risk. It may not occur today, but down the line is going to happen. So you must try as much as possible to migrate your data. before that system backs down. Insecure protocols, just as I was saying in the beginning, if your web application is running on HTTP, it means it's not secured. It should be on HTTPS, right? But more than that, you should also check if there are other protocols like the FTP, if they are well protected. Then weak authentication mechanism. Take for instance, somebody is logging into your app and all the person needs is username and password. There's no two-factor authentication, no OTP, no biometrics. It's not secured, right? Because somebody can easily get a username and password. Somebody can guess it, either using brute force attack or even getting it by force under duress from the owner of the account. So there should be other controls in place to make sure that there is adequate authentication. I know some mobile app, when I download them and I want to log in, I have to take a screenshot of myself. So tomorrow I cannot deny that I was the one who logged in, right? So that is a second layer authentication. So whoever downloads the app, make use of the app, the person's screenshot is saved. So if somebody should even log into the account of a different user, the person face is there, and that can be used to verify the identity of the person who created that risk. So now, we also have incident response plan. It's very important for organizations to have an incident response plan, and we talked about this in module 3, how you can have your incident response plan. Because if you don't have an incident response plan, when you experience a security risk, it will be very difficult for you to respond. Because if you are going to use the fire brigade approach, most likely it won't be effective. So look at your organization. What are the vulnerabilities we're exposed to? And how can we begin to reduce these vulnerabilities that we're exposed to? Because at the end of the day, you want to be seen as an effective chief information security officer. You want to be seen as at the top of your job. And these are things you need to put in place. So we also have weak change management process. We also have weak cyber security strategy. We also have weak cyber threat intelligence program, weak third-party service level agreement, and weak vendor evaluation process. So now for the vendors, as long as you make use of a vendor, you should evaluate the vendor. When you evaluate the vendor, try to see that the vendor has security policies, data privacy policies, data sovereignty also. Because a vendor may be working for you, but the vendor is depending on the use of foreign technology, right? Now, if something should happen, the vendor may not even have control to even provide help to you because he doesn't have the sovereignty. He doesn't own the data. It depends on a foreign country or a different service provider. So these are things you should look at. Who owns the data? And that's why when you do data protection, data sovereignty is a very key aspect. Who owns the data? And another key aspect that you should also look at is employees. When employees are working with their own individual systems, do you have a BYOD policy to make sure that the company at least can have control over that data? If not, that will also be a risk and a vulnerability to the organization. So, having understood threat, having understood vulnerability, we can now understand what risks are. So, risk assessment is just the process of identifying, evaluating, and prioritizing potential threats to an organization information system. Every organization, irrespective of your IT budget, irrespective of where you are, whether you're in Africa or you're in Europe or you're in Asia, you will have risk. The most important thing is how you prioritize treating this risk because there's what they call risk treatment. If you've done an ISMS audit, there's what they call risk treatment. How do we treat this risk? You understand? So this is a very interesting topic. And by the end of today's training, I believe you'll be more informed on how to manage risk. So now, first of all, if you want to assess any risk or carry out any form of risk assessment, is to identify your assets. What are the software we are using? What are the hardware we are using? How many employees do we have? What is their knowledge base? That is identifying your assets. You cannot carry out risk assessment without knowing what you have. So the first thing is identify your assets. And that's why in module 1, we explained asset inventory. So if you want to really get value from this training, you have to follow from module 1 to module 2 to module 3, right? Module 4. And by next 2 weeks, we'll be going to module 5. So the first thing is to carry out asset inventory. You come down, you list all your software. Take, for example, you make use of Zoom. You put Zoom. You make use of Team. You put Team. You make use of Bank One. You put Bank One. All these are software you use, right? They are part of your assets. When you now come to the hardware, you have CCTV, right? You have laptops, you have desktop, you have IP cameras. You list all of them. When you know all your assets, that is when you can begin to say, okay, where can we now see the threats? Where can we now see the vulnerability? Okay, someone is asking a question. My question is on the third party, how can one ensure they are security compliant? So it's very easy to know if a third party is security compliant. First of all, ask them to show evidence that they've complied with the Nigeria Data Protection Act. Any company that has complied with the Data Protection Act must have appointed a data protection officer. Aside that, the person would have drafted some cybersecurity or data protection policy, right? Information security policy. So when an organization has gone through this, then you can begin to say, okay, to some extent, they understand security and they have people in places, because when you have a DPO, the DPO has responsibility. When you have a CISO, the CISO has responsibility. So that is a first layer. But there's a form you can use to evaluate your third-party vendors. So, Charles, you can relate with me after the training. I will send you that form if you are interested in it. A form whereby you can use to relay and assess a third-party vendor. So before you get the third-party vendor onboarded, you can evaluate the third party, look at their security processes, look at their key people, and every other thing. Also, you also need to look at where do they back up their data? Where is their data storage? So that you don't make a wrong choice. You understand? Because a third party may depend on somebody else in data backup. And if that backup is not safe and secured, it will affect you. So even if you make use of a third party vendor to process data, always try to back up your data yourself. In case something happens, you have something to work with. So we move on. So once you've identified the asset, you identify the threats. Remember, we talked about different kinds of threats, right? So you have to determine the threats that each asset is going to be prone to. So there's an Excel sheet I'll use to summarize everything. So you identify the threat. A threat could be an insider threat from an employee. It could be a phishing attack. It could be a malware. You understand? Take, for example, a laptop. A laptop will be facing data breach as a threat. Yes. And if you are evaluating employees, there's also insider threats that the employee will be faced to, because your employee may sell your data even without your knowledge for financial benefits, or maybe they are acting under duress. So you must know the threats that your assets are faced with. Then once you know the threat, you identify the vulnerabilities. Just as we explained, what are those vulnerabilities that our systems are prone to? So once you know your assets, identify your threats, you identify your vulnerability, then you are performing risk assessment. Now, you also need to look at the impact. If our system is compromised, what will be the impact? How will it affect us? Will it lead to financial loss? Will it lead to reputational damage? Will it lead to legal consequences or operational disruption? So let me give an instance. A financial institution now may be faced with a cyber attack, but no money was lost. But because people now discover that they faced a cyber attack, people can now lose trust in the organization, right? And begin to pull their fund. That will now lead to them losing brand reputation. So that will be the impact. They did not lose money, but because it is now known in the public that this system is vulnerable, The impact now will be their reputation. So they have to start telling people, no, we are resilient, no money was lost, everything. But there was an impact. So it's not always every time you experience a cyber attack that it is financial loss. Sometimes these cyber criminals will just want to scare you and tell you that your system is not safe. They won't take any money, they will just expose you. So it's not left for you to take caution. Now, when you know the impact, you now analyze this risk. Is it high risk? Is it medium risk? Is it low risk? And before I proceed, know that when you experience a data breach, you report it to the Nigeria Data Protection Commission. In the case of organizations regulated by CBN, you also report it to CBN, right? And for the NDPC, it is 72 hours timeline they've given you. For CBN, they've given you 24 hours timeline. So try as much as possible to work within these two timelines. For organizations regulated by CBN, you also report to NDPC and CBN. NDPC reporting threshold is 72 hours. CBN reporting threshold is 24 hours, right? So you should take note of those things. Now, once you experience a data breach, there may be legal consequences. People may sue you to court. Yes, because it is their data that has been breached. You understand? That will affect your reputation also. Sometimes it may be a case of financial loss. Money is gone. So you have to know the impact of every potential threat, of every potential vulnerability. And that is what you calculate as your risk for the organization. Now, when you've analyzed the risk, you know if it is high, if it is medium or low. Then you now prioritize the risk. It is not every organization that can resolve their risk profile immediately. You have to prioritize it. Which one is more important? Which one will require the less budget spending? Because take for example now, you need to update your software, and down the line you notice that employees are not trained on how to recognize phishing or social engineering attack. Now, the employee training may just cost your organization few money, whereas the update of your software will cost you more. But you also need to look at, if we don't train the employee very soon, it could also lead to other series of what? Risk. So that is where the CISO have to prioritize the risk. Then there should be strategies in place, which is implementing policies like your password policy, cybersecurity training policy, all those policies, business continuity policy, you implement them, right? So you implement all your policies that needs to be implemented. Sometimes it may be you have to put access control on your IT infrastructure as a strategy to mitigate risk. And you keep monitoring what you are doing, reviewing it, where there are changes and where there are updates. So this is what risk assessment is all about. But it's a practical process, which we are going to also talk about. But we need to understand the foundation so that when we go into the risk treatment framework, you will understand it. So any questions so far? So I'll allow questions to come in because this training is divided into two sections. We have the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect. When we come to the practical aspect, we are going to be looking at common frameworks and standards. Take, for example, we have the NIST framework. We can use that framework for practical risk assessment. You also have the IEC 27005. We also have the Octave. We also have the factor analysis for information risk and quantitative risk analysis model. So there are various models to assess risk. What we just did first is to bring participants to understand the foundation of risk assessment. In subsequent training, we are going to go deeper into the practical aspect. That is where you need to now know how to calculate risk using Excel templates. But I will also show you some of the way you can analyze risk just for the foundation basis. Because without this foundation basis, when we go into the NIST, you'll be confused. You won't catch up. So for the sake of those who have foundation, we have to start with this. So drop your questions. I will bring out the Excel template just to give an insight. Then in 2 weeks time, where we have module 5, we will now go into the practical aspect of risk assessment. So please drop your question while I load the Excel template. Okay, somebody is asking, how can we identify phishing and social engineering sites? See, there are things you can identify using common sense. You don't even need to use technology. Let me give an instance. If you receive a mail that you made a deposit and you were overcharged, the first question you should ask yourself, have I used that product or service? Second, you look at the domain that they sent it from. Is it a legit domain? That is why I always advise organization, if your domain is www, let's say abc.com, that is your domain, right? Your domain is abc.com. You should try and buy abc.com.ng, abc.ng, abc.org. Try and buy as many domain extensions as possible so that they will not clone the domain. But most organizations, once they buy that their .com, they are okay. They can go. Try and buy as many domain extensions as possible so that somebody will not go and create a domain that looks alike and customers will not be falling victim. I know a commercial bank. I checked their domain and I went to look for some nice extensions. It was free. You understand? A very reputable commercial bank. They had the .com. They had the .com.ng, but they did not have .ng. So that was a big issue. So if somebody with ulterior motive buy the .ng and clone the domain to be the same look, the same feel, and send out a mail, many people will fall victim for it. So always look at your domain extension. Look at the domain. Is it from the organization? Then check the language used in the email. Many a times, these fraudsters, their grammar may not be as plain or clean as it should be from an organization. Then also check the time you received that mail. Was it a working hour or an odd hour? You understand? Take for example, your bank sends a mail around 1 a.m. Maybe it's a mass mailing, but if it's personalized, you should look at it carefully, right? So look at the timing you got the mail, look at the grammar of the mail, that's the sentence, look at the domain extension, right? Those are ways you can know. But there are some tools or software whereby if you put any URL, it will tell you if it's a genuine URL or not. So I think I answered your question to some extent. You can always follow us for further updates. Okay. 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 Keep the questions coming. Let's just go through this risk assessment template. But this is not a full risk assessment template because we have to build foundation first before we go into details of risk assessment. So now I'm sharing a new screen. Now, when you come to calculating risk, there are two things you need. You need to know the threat, you need to know the vulnerability. Then you cannot calculate the risk. Now, when CBN issued out the risk cybersecurity framework, the risk-based cybersecurity framework, there was an Excel template they sent out for CISOs to populate. Many of the CISOs did not fill those forms as CBN would want it because you were just putting things as it was. But I'll try and use this to explain what risk assessment is before we go to the practical aspect of risk assessment. You should be familiar with this document. Now, your asset could be your core banking application. One of the threats your core banking application may face is man in the middle attack. because this is a type of attack whereby the attacker can intercept communication between two parties. So your core banking application may have one threat as man in the middle attack. Your laptop, on the other hand, will have a threat called data breach. Your assets may have more than one threat it is exposed to, because the laptop may be kept in a place whereby it will be stolen. Take, for example, you take your official laptop to a bar and you are having a nice time. Unknown to you, somebody picks that laptop and run away with it. That will lead to data breach because your office documents are on that PC, and most likely maybe you did not put password on the system again. There was no control. So a laptop will have data breach as a threat. Now, employees, on the other hand, will be an insider threat because somebody can be working for you, but is taking data and giving out to your competitor because it's getting one benefit or the other. So that could be an insider threat. So now, for those of us who fill this form early this year, you will realize that you didn't take your time to fill this form as it should be. But it's not a problem. That's why we are putting out this training session, so you are more informed. So for employees, insider threat will be one of those things. Then for digital files, ransomware, because somebody can send a link to you. You click on it and your system is locked. You are now forced to pay money for them to de-encrypt the files for you, right? So digital files will be exposed to ransomware or malware. Then for your policies and procedures, they will have privilege abuse. Take, for example, the CISO. The CISO can abuse privilege, whereby if the CISO does not like you, he can just be putting your email on, asking for password. It will just be resetting your password. You understand? So every day you come to the work, you will just see that your password has been reset, and you have to come and beg him. So that could be a privilege abuse, right? Because he has administrative privilege, is now abusing it. Now, for your server, you could have a zero-day attack. And I explain zero-day attack as a vulnerability that is yet to be fixed by the vendor or manufacturer. And people who discover it take advantage of it, and that poses risk. Then for your CCTV, it may be facing a threat of denial of service attack, right? Whereby they want to come into your organization, but they have to make sure that your CCTV does not record anything. So from your IP cameras, especially those of us that use default password on our IP cameras, they gain access and use a DDoS to attack. So fiscal documents also exposed to insider threats. Somebody working for you can snap document, post it online, as we see in many MDAs, right? A memo from the presidency is already on social media before the presidency even make announcements. And before you know, somebody is there saying it's true, it's not true. You understand? So that is insider threat for fiscal document. Then external drive is exposed to data breach. You know, this our flash drive and our hard disks. They are very small. You can easily misplace it, right? So data breach will be a threat. Then third-party vendor, also privilege abuse. You know, they have access to your system, so they can abuse their privileges if they want to. So that is one threat that we'll be looking at. So I'll take questions at this point. Uh, okay, is there any question? Okay, someone is saying the screen is not too legible for the Excel document. Don't worry, you'll get the Excel document so you can look at it yourself if your screen is not too big. But when you're on YouTube, you can easily magnify your screen, right? Um, so any question before we go to vulnerability? Okay. Okay, sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability aspect. So, for a core banking application, one vulnerability that we'll look at is weak authentication. If people want to access your core banking app and all they need is username and password, it's weak, right? It's very weak. Your laptop could be using end of life application, which is vulnerable. You understand? Employees, inadequate staffing, digital files, weak authentication mechanism. So for us to really get value from risk assessment, we have to build this foundation. So when we go to a methodology or a framework, you already understand what risk assessment is and how to calculate it. So if you have any question, please drop those questions. For the meantime, I think we'll go to quiz just to see that what we've been learning is making sense. And we have just 10 more minutes. So the next time we'll be meeting, we'll be looking at the practical aspect of analyzing risk. So please study the materials when you get them, and always make sure that at the end of each training, you go through this material with your other co-workers, because the knowledge is not just for the CISO, it's for the organization, right? So that everybody within the organization understands risk assessment. Okay, so what I will do is I will try as much as possible to drop the modules on the WhatsApp group. I'll try as much as possible to drop the modules on the WhatsApp group, so that for the previous ones, so that those that are just joining us can also catch up. So let's go to the quiz session. So what is cybersecurity risk? We have option A, option B, option C, and D. What is cybersecurity risk? You can drop it on the chat box. What is cybersecurity risk? Someone is saying B. How true is it? Okay, let's find out if it's true. The answer is actually B. Yeah. So the next question is, which of the following is not considered a cyber threat? Which of the following is not considered a cyber threat? Which of the following is not considered a cyber threat? Okay. Okay, let's find out. Yeah, D is correct. What is a zero-day exploit? What is a zero-day exploit? Okay. C is correct. Then, which of the following best describes a vulnerability in cybersecurity? Which of the following best describes a vulnerability in cybersecurity? For those of us who are yet to join the WhatsApp group, because this training material will be posted on the WhatsApp group, please join the WhatsApp group. That's where you get updates, and it's faster for communication. Um, Ifeanyi, you can tell me your bank. I will try and trace if you got the material for last week. I don't know your bank or financial institution, so you can just help me by letting me know. Okay, the answer is B. So, which of the following is not an example of internal threat? Which of the following is not an example of internal threat? Ifeanyi, please, I'm still waiting for your response. You say you did not get material for last training. I need to follow to know why. Okay. Answer is B. Okay. So we've come to the end of the training, and I want to say a very big thank you to everyone who has participated so far. It's been very informative, and as you know, 1 hour is not enough for such training. So when next we meet, we'll look at the practical aspect of risk assessment. But for you to be able to understand that module, you must understand the foundation. You must know what threats, risk, vulnerability are, so that when we start calculating those risks that we're exposed to, it makes more sense. But before we go, I will just play one ad so that I can support Data Protection and Privacy Academy, who is one of our sister companies doing great things.
Protection conversation should go beyond technicalities.
Is your business prepared for the challenges of data security in today's digital age? Protecting sensitive information has never been more critical. Get practical experience by participating in interactive exercises, simulations, and real-world case studies. With our cutting-edge curriculum and hands-on exercises, you'll gain practical experience in data protection techniques and tools. You'll learn industry best practices and innovative strategies to ensure the security of your valuable information. Protect your data with Data Protection and Privacy Academy, because your business deserves the best. Protecting your business data is crucial in today's digital world. But how can you ensure that your data remains secure against ever-evolving cyber threats? Introducing Data Protection and Privacy Academy, the comprehensive training program that equips you with the skills and knowledge to safeguard your valuable information.
Whether you're an IT professional, a business owner, or an aspiring data protection officer, our program is designed to cater to your specific needs. Enroll in Data Protection and Privacy Academy today and embark on a journey towards a secure and trusted future for your business.
So thank you, everyone. And want to join the WhatsApp group. In the next 2 minutes, the slides will be shared so that you can prepare for the practical aspect. Thank you and enjoy your weekend.